just real briefly, I want to tell you a little bit about our work. We protect wildlife, wilderness, water, and sustainable access throughout the Los Padres National Forest and the Carrizo Plain National Monument. We achieve this through education, days like today, advocacy, and when necessary, legal action for the benefit of our communities, the climate, and future generations. I'm in charge of this program called Room to Roam, and we protect and restore critical wildlife corridors. And we do that through four major areas. We educate on wildlife conflicts. One of the reasons why I'm so excited about Emily being here today is we have a lot of rattlesnakes in our area, and they can cause conflicts for people that don't know what to do properly with them. Map wildlife movements and vehicle collisions, and we've been doing this throughout our forests to really help with restoring and protecting the habitats for the beautiful species that live in our area. And through those maps, we are informing corridor policy. Last year, we actually worked on the Ventura corridor policy right here for the town that I live in. And now we're looking at the Santa Maria corridor policy and the Santa Barbara corridor policy. So that's a little bit about us. If you want to find out more about our organization, you can go to our website. And I will give you more information about how you could take action in your community at the end of the webinar.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Emily Taylor, and I'm so happy to be here today talking about my very favorite thing to talk about, snakes. Today, you're going to hear some tales about snakes in the field. You're going to learn something about snakes, mainly from California, but from a few other places. And I'm going to be reading to you some excerpts from my recently published book, California Snakes and How to Find Them by Heyday Books. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to take a moment to tell you about my kind of weird and wild entrance into this strange niche in my life where I find myself being obsessed with snakes. And that started all at UC Berkeley when I was an undergraduate majoring in English and wondering what to do with my life. And through, like I said, some very strange circumstances that involved a California king snake that I'm going to read to you about in just a minute. I became obsessed with snakes and decided that I wanted to do research on them and spend the rest of my life with them. I then began working on my PhD at Arizona State University, where I really got involved in earnest with working with rattlesnakes. And then ever since then, this is my 20th year now at Cal Poly. I have been studying rattlesnakes here on the central coast of California. In addition to studying rattlesnakes, I do a lot of teaching. I teach herpetology. I've taught 15 times at Cal Poly. So I know a thing or two about some other snakes and reptiles and even amphibians. So when I think of rattlesnakes, I think of just words like wondrous, magnificent, amazing, just incredible words like that. But I realize that my words are not, the way I think about snakes are not the way that a lot of other people do, okay? And so snakes, as we know, are extremely maligned animals. And the longer I've been in my career, realizing that the truth is how amazing they are, and people don't know about this, the more I've felt that it's kind of my moral obligation and duty to share what I know about these snakes with people. So even some scientists now don't like snakes, and certainly some of the early scientists didn't. This is a famous quote by Carl Linnaeus, who's the father of our binomial nomenclature system, how we name organisms, where he called the snakes foul and loathsome, abhorrent, that filthy skin, a fierce aspect, calculating eye, offensive voice, squalid habitation, terrible venom. And he says, and so their creator has not exerted his powers to make many of them. Well, I like to say that Linnaeus probably, would have been good to get out of Europe a little more, because in fact, if he had, he would have known that there's a lot of snakes actually. And we have a lot of those here in California. California is an amazing state for snakes. We have nearly 50 species just here in California. That's more than we should have just due to space alone. And of course, that's because of the incredible biodiversity of California in general. It's spans many latitudes. We have many different ecosystem types. And so it's not just snakes. We have a lot of different types of organisms. They're from 5 different families. So we span a lot of different types of diversity of snakes here. And then, of course, they range from the coast to the deserts. There's very few places in California you can go where there's not some kind of snake. Some of the deepest, densest urban centers are some of the only places that may not have any snakes. And so because of this growing moral obligation to share what I know with people about snakes, I decided to write this book, which so lucky to have Heyday Books up in Berkeley, California. They're a small publisher. Be really excited to publish this book. And this book is kind of two things in one. It's kind of like a field guide, but it's not highly technical. So it's more of a field guide for people who are just getting interested in snakes and snake hunting, which I call the new bird watching. But it's also a tome of stories and photographs. So there's amazing photographs from many of my colleagues that you're going to be able to see here today. And then I told stories about snakes, especially focused on how to find them in the wild. Snakes are very, very secretive. The title of today's presentation is The Secret Lives of Snakes. And so if you just go out looking for them, you may not find them unless you know what you're doing. At the same time, people who know how to find snakes won't tell you, go to this spot, go to that spot, go to this exact place. And that's because if that happens, if you tell people, sometimes you can tell people, other people tell people, and so on. And then that place ends up getting ruined, either from people who hate snakes or just by accident. And so you have to learn to find places yourself. And I've tried to give people the tools on how to do that in this book. So to start our conversation about California snakes, I wanted to frame most of this entire talk with answers to the question of why snakes. So you're going to see this. This is the question, Q. And then the rest of my slides tonight are going to be A and various answers about why snakes, why they're fascinating, why I decided to write a book on them, why I love them so much, and why you should love them so much. And certainly why you should at least respect them, even if you don't love them so much. Okay. And so, for example, we're looking at this photo of this Coast Mountain king snake taken by Marissa Ishimatsu, who took lots of photos in the book. And this snake tends to evoke a lot of emotions in people, okay? So anything ranging from, wow, look at those beautiful colors, to some people who don't know a lot about snakes would say, oh, red on black. That might be telling us that this snake is dangerous. We might be scared of that snake. And so I wanted to start this, why snakes, with the idea of that snakes are incredible. And I'm going to start by reading a passage from the preface of my book to get us started. This book is for snake lovers and snake lovers to be. Few animals capture our imagination like snakes do, but their reputation is as forked as their tongues. For many people, snakes are scary, gross, and even considered bad omens. For others like me, snakes represent grace, beauty, and resilience. They're just as fantastic as any beasts that Harry Potter encountered in the wizarding world. Now, I may be just about as slithering as they come, but there will be no foolish wand waving or silly incantations in this book. Learning about California snakes and how to find them requires practice, persistence, and luck. In this book, I coach you on what you need to develop snake hunting skills and cheerlead you on being persistent enough to find the snakes that you seek. My love affair with snakes began 25 years ago on a class field trip in college when my herpetology professor handed me a California king snake he had found under a log. My vision went dark around the edges as I stared, mesmerized, at the shiny black and white coils of muscle writhing in my hands. From then on, it was a rare log, rock, or piece of tin I passed without looking underneath. I was hooked. I now spend much of my time spreading the good word about California snakes in every way I can by teaching my own herpetology students, unlocking the secrets of snakes in my research at Cal Poly, promoting ways to live safely in areas with rattlesnakes, and sharing snake stories everywhere I go. So one of the first answers that we can give here is that snakes are beautiful. Beauty is something that is different for different people. They do say, of course, the adage is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But this snake cracks open the hearts of the most stalwart snake hater. And this is a quintessential beautiful California snake from North Bay area. And this is the California red-sided garter snake. It's actually not the San Francisco garter snake. Some people think it is. Those are kind of similar looking, but they typically have more of a solid red stripe along the side. But to be something beautiful is really subjective, but I invite you now to try to stretch your brains a little bit to think about how these animals indeed encompass and embody the concept of beauty as we look through a few incredible photographs of some of the snakes of California. So in this case, we have these really bright colors, which indeed the color scheme of the entire book was based on, which I love. But in other snakes, we don't have color. They may be beautiful in different ways. This is a two-striped garter snake hanging out near the beach. These are partly aquatic snakes. So it lives in kind of this brackish water here near the beach. And you may be wondering why it's a two-striped garter snake. It doesn't have any stripes. Well, snakes like to have exceptions up their sleeveless sleeves. And in this case, this is a population of two-striped garter snakes that has no stripes. These are some of the tidbits that you can learn when you're reading my book. You find a snake. What is that? Well, while there is a really good new field guide called California Amphibians and Reptiles by Bob Hansen and Jackson Shedd to get really into the nitty-gritty, that book's basically my Bible now. My book is a good introduction on trying to figure out what these animals are and to get interested in how to find them. The beauty of snakes is pretty cool too when we look at them up close. So this snake that you're looking at, the Western black-headed snake, is tiny. Adults are about the size of a pencil, maybe a little bit bigger in some cases. And so usually we don't get to see this level of detail until we have amazing photographers, like in this case, Spencer Riffle, who's giving us these up-close images at the way that their scales overlap with one another, at the speckling they have. This, if you were a scorpion or a centipede, you would not think that this was beautiful. This would be like one of the worms in Dune coming at you. These snakes just scarf down spiders, scorpions, centipedes like crazy. This is one of my all-time favorite snakes, the coast night snake, yet another really, really small snake that most people never get to see up close. But I invite you to look at the incredible coppery color of its color pattern it has, and the way that its eyes have the beautiful copper as well. The vertical pupil that in part gives them the name night snake, even though they may be active during the day, but usually underneath stuff. So we don't usually see them very often, especially not during the day. This is one of the most beautiful rattlesnakes I've ever seen, this photo. I like to call this a Halloween rattlesnake from Marissa Shimatsu. The southwestern speckled rattlesnake, which lives in our southwestern deserts in southwestern and southeastern deserts, southern deserts in California, let's put it that way, southwestern deserts of the United States, comes in many different colors. This is a rock-dwelling snake, and so you tend to see that it oftentimes will match the colors of the rocks around it through natural selection. We get snakes that are mostly black in lava areas. We get snakes that are mostly white. We have snakes that are bluish and pinkish. In this case, this just incredible Halloween colors of orange and black. And then back to colorful snakes. Ringneck snakes are one of those snakes that, again, really small. When people see it, they say, what does this color mean, right? This snake has mostly kind of grayish colors on its back, with the exception of that ring that it has. However, when you turn it over, or when it turns itself over, we see something much different. We see this truly incredible, bright, bright, bright reddish color. Well, that red color oftentimes can mean something. I'm stalling because I lost my bookmark here, and I have to find the section in the book. Here we go. I'm going to read to you a short excerpt from a section in my book. Each species account of California's 50 snakes has a section at the end that's called You Might Like to Know, where I tell you a little interesting detail about these snakes. And I'm going to tell you about the color of this ringneck snake. No discussion of ringneck snakes will be complete without acknowledging the charming posture that they adopt when they are defensive. If you're lucky enough to find a ringneck snake under a log, and if you then disturb it, it will immediately curl up its tail into an ornate coil and flash you with it. The color red is often used by animals to signal a warning to would-be predators. In particular, it can often indicate that the prey is poisonous or unpalatable. Some animals ride on the coattails of these trailblazers by showing off a red warning display, even though they're not actually toxic. This is known as mimicry. So which is the ringneck snake? Well, it definitely isn't toxic to eat. It does have venom that could potentially be effectively used to defend itself against small predators, like another snake that tried to eat it. That said, it appears the ringneck snake is mainly a mimic, a bluffer that shows off its red belly despite being harmless to a predator, including people. The odor of the musk that these snakes so readily exude as they coil up defensively is possibly bad enough to count as toxic if you have a sense of humor and of smell. While among the stinkiest of all California snakes, these little bluffers more than make up for it in charm. All right, moving on to the next answer. Snakes live in beautiful places. One of the wonderful privileges about being a field biologist is that it takes me to most wonderful corners of our state and indeed of our world, where I get to see snakes doing really cool things. And like I told you before, Snakes extend from our coasts, like we're the striped racer in sand dunes, or this rattlesnake that is coiled up on a beach in San Luis Obispo where people frequent all the time and sometimes don't even notice the rattlesnakes that are around them. On inland into our grasslands and meadows, through the Central Valley of California, up into the Sierra Nevada, indeed up into some of the highest reaches of the Sierra Nevada, and then over into one of my favorite playgrounds, the Mojave Desert. If you look closely at this photo of the Mojave Desert, you might see a couple things sticking out that don't belong there. Right here, that's me and my graduate student Owen on a recent field trip. And Marissa was back at camp and she took a photo of us. We thought we were going to make it to the top. We didn't. It's a lot steeper and farther than it looks, but it was an amazing view nonetheless. And when you get to go to places like this, which is a sand dune area in the Mojave Desert, you might be lucky enough to find some of the amazing snakes that are adapted to live there, including this animal, the sidewinder. This really shows us a lot in this photo. This is a photo taken by Marissa that is one of my favorite types of photos because it's an in situ photo, meaning it was taken as found with a sidewinder coiled up there doing a few different things. Some people say to me, oh, snakes, they're just sitting there. They're not doing anything. And I say, ah, no, look, it's doing so many things right now. So the snake is coiled up. It's smushed itself into the sand a little bit. It's in the shade. Those could all be for thermal reasons to stay out of the sun, to keep its body cool. In addition, it's coiled up in a classic hunting posture, which means it's waiting for something to walk by so that it might ambush it. And if you take a look at that little mound of sand behind it, you might see in the next photo what happens if we don't disturb snakes. And I'm using this as a theme, to introduce a theme in my book, which is to leave snakes alone and watch them. In a minute, I'm going to talk to you about, for non-rattlesnakes, for other snakes, how picking them up sometimes and handling them can be really fun. But leaving them alone can be great too, because if you do, you might see them do really cool things. I said before that snake watching is the new bird watching, and I mean it. Snakes do awesome things if we give them the space and the room to do it. So Marissa didn't mess with this snake. She just came back later, and sure enough, she found that that snake had been waiting patiently for the inhabitant of that mound behind it to come out. And this is what she found it doing: eating a desert iguana that had dug its way out of that burrow as the temperatures were going up. Seeing a snake eating in the wild is one of the most special things that you can see. So leave snakes alone and you might be able to see that. All right. Another answer is that some snakes are hard to find. So I was really attracted to snakes and snake hunting when I was in college and I was learning about wildlife because many times they represented a challenge. It wasn't like many other types of species and animals, birds, where I would go out and it would be really easy to find them. In this case, we had to work at it. And this really cute little tiny, tiny snake, the Western thread snake, is a great example of this. Behold this snake. It has vestigial or reduced eyes, little eye spots that are sensitive to light, but it doesn't really use its vision very much. And that's mainly because the snake is underground, terrorizing termite nests for food all the time. And only occasionally do we get to see these snakes on the surface. And then we can say, oh, that's actually not an earthworm. It has scales. That's actually a snake. And this snake has an amazing natural history story associated with it that I chose to put in the book. And I'm going to read to you that excerpt now. Now, I don't want anyone here to get me thinking that I actually don't like birds, because I do. I think birds are amazing. But let's just face it, birds have enjoyed a really much stronger reputation than snakes. So I'm just trying to level the playing field a little bit. With that said, here is my story about thread snakes. Thread snakes are the subject of one of the most wild and wacky natural history stories of all time. Owls sometimes capture thread snakes and bring them back to their nests. Typically, owls kill prey before feeding them to their chicks, but they drop the thread snakes into the nest alive, where the snakes are not usually eaten by the chicks, but rather burrow into the nest material and take up residence within, feeding upon the insects that are attracted to the bits of rotting flesh left over by the messy chicks. The owl-thread snake relationship is allegedly one of mutualism, where the snakes benefit by getting food and the owls benefit by having personal exterminators that keep insects at bay. One study even found that the owl chicks in nests with thread snakes grew faster and were more likely to survive than those in nests without these snakes. Okay, So whereas some snakes, like thread snakes, are really hard to find, others can be easy to find, like gopher snakes. Gopher snakes are probably the most commonly seen snake in California. They cover almost every single inch of California, including the deserts and the coast and the Central Valley and the Sierra Nevada. The only place they're absent is from really high elevations in the Sierra Nevada and then the centers of cities, although they do get pretty far into suburbs as far as snakes go. Gopher snakes oftentimes are overlooked because they're really common. But take a look at this incredible animal right here, and I want you to think about gopher snakes in a new way. The very fact of gopher snakes being so common can actually be something that can be thought of as being amazing about them. So here is a couple of excerpts about gopher snakes from the book. Sure, finding rare snakes is a major thrill, but there's something extremely impressive about how incredibly common gopher snake, how the incredibly common gopher snake has conquered every square inch of California except snow-covered mountaintops. At certain times of year, I can't leave my house without seeing a gopher snake. One of the main things I love about California's most common harmless snake is how wonderful they are for outreach events. At my university, we have 3 gopher snake ambassadors that work for their monthly mice by going on elementary school visits with my students. Over the past decade or so, Milo, Snubs, and Bertha have been held, prodded, squeezed, and lovingly petted by many thousands of children. Even the most reluctant child will usually reach out to touch Milo's shiny scales, exclaiming that snakes aren't slimy after all. I'd like to think that our ambassador gopher snakes have significantly improved snake public relations among the children of San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties over the years. Positive experiences with snakes like Milo can last a lifetime and can even trickle up to impact how their families think about snakes too. And so indeed, even though I talk in the book about, not always catching snakes and being careful that we don't harm them, there is really something to be said about the wonder of holding a snake in your hands. For me, that was one of the things that did it. A lot of the other wildlife that I saw on my field trips, I had to watch through binoculars or I had to watch on game cameras, which is exciting too. Hold that thought, because that's coming back in just a minute. But actually being able to hold them was something different for me, something really, really, really special. This is the first photo in the book. It's on in the preface and the front matter, where I talk about exactly that, about how these snakes that we find and hold as kids can really be gateways into a lifetime of naturalism. And so I wanted to share a wonderful photo. This is Darius here, who's featured in the book. And then Darius was really, really excited to get his copy of the book in exchange for being a model. And this is Darius a few months later, showing off his picture in my book and wearing the limited edition t-shirt that his father got him for the book. So for me, this is what it's all about here. It's about the next generation of herpers learning how to responsibly find snakes in the wild and appreciate those snakes in the wild. And we need it. We really, really, really need it. Snakes really need it, especially rattlesnakes. And so I'm going to be transitioning into talking about rattlesnakes, which is my one true love for the rest of this presentation. And this is the only kind of negative or jarring series of images that I'm going to show you. There's one more coming up on the same screen in just a moment. And it's the answer why snakes, to the question why snakes, is that these are among the most maligned and persecuted of all animals. And so for me, yeah, I love these snakes and I want to help them, but it's also just become almost like a lesson in social science and psychology for me. Like, if I can change someone's mind about snakes, I feel like I could change their minds about anything. I mean, first of all, let's start. Rattlesnakes are venomous. They are dangerous. So there is that. Must acknowledge that. But much of the danger of rattlesnake is overblown and is people are bitten when they are either doing something they shouldn't do or when they are killing rattlesnakes, okay? It turns out that rattlesnake safety is relatively easy, and I do a lot of workshops and seminars on snake safety to try to reduce human-wildlife conflict in the form of human-snake conflict. Not in California anymore, but in many states in our nation, rattlesnake roundups are still an annual event. The Sweetwater Rattlesnake Roundup is about 3 weeks away. It's going to be taking place in Sweetwater, Texas. And thousands of Western diamondback rattlesnakes are rounded up mainly by pouring gasoline down their dens, which causes them to rush out, gasping for air, and also poisons the land. But the worst part of this is the way the snakes are treated when they're in captivity. Their snakes are decapitated, and then they have little children are able to come and pay to skin the snakes. And then they actually take their little hands and put it in the blood and make handprints on the wall that they then sign. And this photo here won some major awards. It's called the Wall of Shame, which I really truly believe. I believe that these types of events are the wrong way to be teaching values to our children. It doesn't matter if you don't like rattlesnakes or if you're scared of rattlesnakes. This is not the way to teach children to respect life and to respect the environment. And so part of the reason I do what I do is to try to reverse some of these wrongs and to try to get out ahead of some of these. And many rattlesnake roundups have been changed into no-kill festivals. Certainly not by my actions, but by actions of many, many other snake advocates out there. And so we can only hope that one day that will also happen with the Sweetwater rattlesnake roundup and some of the rest of them that are existing. But why do I bring this up? I bring this up because I wanted to now talk about how amazing rattlesnakes actually are. I call this section the allure of the rattlesnake, because rattlesnakes have always held a special allure to me. And I want to just show you some photos when you're looking at them, under a controlled situation or in photos or in safe environments. You can really start to get a good idea about what they do and how amazing they are. So some of the photos in my book show rattlesnakes in the wild in situ, like this really, really just well-fed, healthy-looking Great Basin rattlesnake. You're going to hear in a few minutes about some of the wonderful things rattlesnakes do for us. They play an especially important role in our ecosystem because they both eat rodents and are eaten by predators, including things like raptors. This red diamond rattlesnake has the distinction, I don't know if you should call it that, of being the only protected rattlesnake species in California. And that is because lives only in extreme Southern California where there's a lot of development going on. And so red diamond rattlesnakes are protected by law in California. This incredible Panamint rattlesnake is another rock dweller where it really blends in with the rocks around it. These rattlesnakes occur kind of north of the I-15 corridor in the Death Valley and Owens Valley area, and they come in so many different colors and patterns. But the last excerpt that I'd like to read to you from my book is about the Western rattlesnake. And the Western rattlesnake, which is sometimes alternately known as the Southern Pacific rattlesnake down in Southern California, Northern Pacific in Northern California and Central Valley, and then the Great Basin rattlesnake on the east side of the Northern Sierra. This is California's most common rattlesnake. And I'd like to just tell you a little bit about this snake from the book. Choosing a favorite snake for me is like asking a parent to pick a favorite child. Nearly impossible. The expected answer might be the most striking, beautiful snake, and on some days, sinuous snake beauty is indeed the most compelling draw for me. However, as a biologist, I have a more nuanced view of what it is to like, or indeed to love, wildlife. Beauty matters, sure, but more important is the feeling I have when I encounter a snake in the wild. It is the thrill of the hunt and the greater thrill of finding a snake. It is watching their interesting behaviors, which I might have missed if I had interfered with them by prodding them or capturing them. It is their success in persisting in high numbers, even in areas where people persecute them. And this braid of connection is strongest for me with the Western rattlesnake, which I confess is my absolute favorite snake. I've uncovered hundreds under tin boards at junk piles, as shown on the left here. I have radio tracked hundreds with my students over the years, shown on the right, getting a chance to peer into their private lives for months or even years. I've rescued hundreds from yards where, if not for me, animal control officers or homeowners might have beheaded them with shovels just for daring to exist. With familiarity comes understanding and affection. The Western rattlesnake, like other rattlesnakes, is unfairly vilified and sensationalized by nearly everyone. The truth is that this species, which is notable in California because its wide range and high density means that it is the rattlesnake species that most often comes into contact with people, is actually a gentle snake that wants nothing to do with us. In fact, it does us a great service by controlling rodent populations that, if left unchecked, would denude our plants, eat our crops, and spread disease. Western rattlesnakes can live for decades, have complex social lives, complete with friends and family members, and give birth to live pups that they protect from predators during the vulnerable period before their first shed. The sheer volume of my experience with these beautiful snakes has bred in me a strong affection and an urgent need to share what I know about living peacefully with Western rattlesnakes. So before I go on and tell you more about rattlesnakes and the efforts that we're making to try to reduce human rattlesnake conflict, I did want to mention that this has to be a multi-pronged approach, okay? So on the last slide, I'll be giving you some links to some social media accounts that you can follow. But I basically tried to take on a research, outreach, and management approach, where I do research with my Cal Poly students on rattlesnake biology. I do outreach, events just like this, on telling people the true nature of rattlesnakes. And we also do management, because the truth is that no matter how much we love rattlesnakes, a rattlesnake in someone's yard could potentially be a hazard. And so for that reason, about 5 years ago, I started a company called Central Coast Snake Services that is aimed at reducing human rattlesnake conflict here on the Central Coast of California and in California at large. And for that, for example, we provide free relocation of rattlesnakes from people's yards in San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. When I get to do that, I get to spread outreach like crazy with people and also keep them safe at the same time. It's just a win-win-win. And win, of course, for the snakes that get to be relocated according to evidence-based practices, meaning I'm not taking them 20 miles away and dumping them where they're not going to do well. I'm taking them about a quarter mile away where they're still going to do well according to science. But we'll get back to more of that later on. For now, getting back to snakes and how incredible they are. Rattlesnakes do important things for us. Look at this video of an adult rattlesnake eating an adult California ground squirrel at Montaña de Oro State Park. The size of the gaping mouth on that animal. This is its favorite food. They eat tons of these ground squirrels and indeed a bunch of other rodents. And by virtue of doing this, they play this incredible role in the ecosystem, enough to where they help us more than they actually hurt us. So I told you before that they are mesopredators, meaning that they both eat these rodents and they also are eaten by these predators. That makes them doubly important in ecological systems in the sense of being able to be magnifying and amplifying that rodent energy on up the food chain. But there's another reason why as well. It turns out that in this day and age of machine learning, rattlesnake venoms are being found to be potential drug candidates left and right. And I'm going to show you an example of an older one that's not even with machine learning. This drug, eptifibatide, was put on the market back here in 1998. It's an anticoagulant that comes directly from rattlesnake venom. And it's used in people who are getting stents put into their coronary arteries to prop them open because they're at risk of a heart attack. Stents sometimes attract blood clots. And so for that reason, these eptifibatide can help prevent the blood clots. Excuse me. So the combination of this is that here in the United States, rattlesnakes are actually saving a lot more human lives than they're taking, which is a pretty strong statement to make, but I will stand by it any given day. All right, so for the rest of the talk, I wanted to tell you about this major outreach method, a community science project called Project RattleCam that I have with my colleague Scott Boback from Dickinson College in Pennsylvania, initiated about 4 years ago, and it really took on a lot of steam last year. And this is us using live streaming cameras to study rattlesnakes at their dens and also to share the true behavior of rattlesnakes with the world. Because the stuff we see on TV, where rattlesnakes are rattling and striking and acting terrifying, is not what rattlesnakes actually do, unless they're terrified. Rattlesnakes in the wild are actually calm and they do fascinating things. Here is a live streaming image. You can see that the camera here is a remote pan tilt zoom. This is a western rattlesnake in San Luis Obispo County. I want you to watch here and see what's going on. That's a baby rattlesnake that's going to curl up with this adult snake. And if you hadn't been watching this snake the whole summer, we might think that that was its mother, because rattlesnake babies oftentimes hang out with their mothers. However, that rattlesnake mother is not its mother. It's still pregnant. That's Macaroni, a rattlesnake that was named by our community scientists, and it's letting another one's baby cuddle with it. Keep your eye on that baby. Don't look away. You're about to be treated to something. All right. So that clip right there of a baby rattlesnake going up and being tolerated and sitting on and basically cuddling with another adult female that's not its mother was really transformative for a lot of people. People think that that's really cool to see. And so indeed, this is the same image, by the way, the same video here. Indeed, this is something that we realize could be a really big deal. We got this in 2021 in the first year that we were doing a live streaming camera at a very, very, very small snake den that in the summer turns into a rookery where pregnant female rattlesnakes hang out together. And there was just a few females there. We were able to see some really cool stuff. But we also thought, how cool would it be to be able to put this in at a big den of rattlesnakes, which we don't have as many of those in California as I would like. We have lots of those in Colorado where I study prairie rattlesnakes. So now I'm going to show you a whole bunch of rapid fire clips of prairie rattlesnakes doing really cool things. Like this snake yawning for the camera. I want to talk a little bit about this project as you see this just on a loop really quick. This was from this past year, 2024, and camera is zoomed in here. So this is live streamed to YouTube, and people who are watching from anywhere in the world can just log in 24 hours a day. There's night vision at night and see what the rattlesnakes are doing. And of course, never are they rattling and striking. They're doing interesting things like this. People can ask the moderator to zoom in on that snake, and we can zoom in. Watching it live makes people feel like they're a part of it. And that is very, very transformative. This is a sped up twice footage of a rattlesnake drinking rainwater from its coils. People loved this too. When it starts raining, rattlesnakes will curl up into little teacups, collect the rainwater on their backs, and drink from it. This, of course, is part of our outreach arm. Meanwhile, at other dens, we do studies that are hands-on where we collect the snakes, and we have done recent studies showing that these mother rattlesnakes that are pregnant all summer long rely on this rain and drinking this rainwater because they have no other access to water. In fact, they only have an active season from mid-May through early November. And so they're under snow the rest of the year, like right now. And so they really rely on this rainwater. And we also showed scientifically that when they drink this rainwater, they can pass it across their placentas to the little baby rattlesnakes that are developing in them. And those baby rattlesnakes are born better hydrated. Here's a still image from a paper we recently published on drinking in snakes. And I want you to look at this and say, like, I challenge anyone to tell me that rattlesnakes that just sit there aren't doing anything. This snake was sitting there and it started raining. In fact, this was actually artificial rain that we had sprayed on it to get it to do this as part of a study. And it tilted its body downhill so that the rainwater would collect down here at the bottom and it could drink off of its back. Look how it's flattened its body like a little flying saucer so that it can collect that rainwater on it. Rattlesnakes are always doing something really amazing. Okay, continuing my answers to why rattlesnakes are so amazing. They're very, very social. These are all a bunch of pregnant female rattlesnakes that are hanging out together. Look at the quality of this camera. I can't believe this, that I'm actually watching this from over 1,000 miles away, seeing this. Now look at that snake in the middle, jerking its head along the other snake's back. If I had just walked up to it, I would have thought, oh, that's a male that's courting a female. That's a lot of times this head jerking behavior is what a male will do when it's interested in a female. But I knew from watching this that these were all pregnant females. And plus, now that I've watched it enough, I can tell that the way it's jerking its head is a little different. Well, it turns out that when you're not there to scare the rattlesnakes into being really still or to rattling, that they behave really differently. And with this live streaming camera, we've uncovered that they actually have a secret language. And this is it. They're talking to each other with this secret language. Consider this pregnant female rattlesnake sitting here. And so someone else's baby rattlesnake is approaching. And just watch what happens. What are they saying to each other? I'm not going to be able to tell you, at least not yet. I want to know so badly. But one of the really fascinating things is that we've uncovered that they do it only when they're basically facing each other, when they can actually see each other's heads jerking like that. They do it from birth, so babies will do it. Keep your eye on this baby right now. It's trying to go past this pregnant mama who wants no part of it. Now watch. She says nope. And then as time goes on, you can see that the little babies are doing the head jerking too. So they're born, this is just a few day old baby. They're born with this ability to communicate somehow with this. I need to become a code breaker so that I can figure out what the heck they're saying to each other because I dream about it at night. I need to know. It's a community science project. So we have named different snakes in this mega den of hundreds of snakes. They don't have colors on their backs, but we've used the colors here to diagram the fact that they have different markings on their backs. And so people in the public who watch YouTube can actually identify and have the opportunity to name different snakes. This is important because one of the research projects we're doing is we're studying the social networks of these snakes, going back and looking at the whole summer long about how much time certain snakes spent together. And preliminary data from my grad student Owen are showing that female rattlesnakes tend to form stronger social networks than males, and that certain snakes indeed like to hang out with other snakes. They have friends. And it's not just rattlesnakes. There are garter snakes at the dens, and people who watch are shocked that the garter snakes and rattlesnakes seem to tolerate one another. But when you really think about it, why wouldn't they? They don't eat each other. They don't compete for each other's food. They eat different things. So why not? And I'm going to show you now a really funny video that we have on our YouTube channel, the Project Rattlecam YouTube channel. You should check it out. There's hundreds of clips that we've made. This one's really funny because there's a voiceover.
All right, you guys, listen up. This is not a place for you. This is not for you. Get your tail out of my face. This is not a place for you. This is a place for rattlesnakes. Look over here. These are rattles. You don't have them. You don't belong. Stop that. Get your tail off of me. Stop. God, garter snakes. This, you're choking me. Stop it. Stop. Get off of me. Oh, yeah. Okay. You don't. Oh. Yeah. Oh. 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 I hate garter snakes. Oh, this is no, I'm out. I'm out. This is nonsense. Oh, don't respect. I'm 4 times your size. This is nonsense. I could totally bite you. I got venom. I got real venom, not that rear fang crap that you have. Oh, no, don't go up there. Don't. They're animals. Those guys are complete jerks. Oh, I hate garter snakes. They're the worst. Hate them.
So I love that clip. That's my husband doing the voiceover. He's very talented. I love that though, and it's fascinating because it shows very, very rarely they don't tolerate each other. They do get irritated. You could tell by the body language of that rattlesnake that it was irritated with these, frankly, amorous garter snakes hanging all over it because garter snakes are kind of adapted to scramble with one another and they'll try to mate with anything that moves. Okay. All right, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is rattlesnake sex lives. They have absolutely fascinating sex lives. So on the right-hand side, you're seeing a male rattlesnake. On the left-hand side is a female rattlesnake, and they are mating. And when they mate like this, the male will insert one of his 2 penises, and they'll stay like that for quite some time. And in fact, occasionally, if you come across snakes, I like to tell a story about, walking in Arizona and there's like a wash you're walking across and you see a really long rattlesnake, like way longer than they possibly could be. When you get up close, you realize it's actually that they're latched up together and the female on the right here has decided to go about her day and she's just dragging the male along behind her. And it appears as just this really long rattlesnake. Like that's really, really fascinating and interesting. But one of the neat things is that they mate and then, like I said, they have live birth, so they become pregnant, and they will actually gestate those baby the fetal rattlesnakes for a few months, and then they give birth and they actually care for those babies for a certain amount of time. So one of the things that we didn't expect to see on the rattle cam was birth, and we saw it. So this was at night. This was all happening. This is sped up just 2 times. So you can actually see birthing occurring in these snakes. And what you'll see is that the baby rattlesnakes, as mother pushes them out, come out inside amniotic sacs. So they are literally carried inside the female, just like human babies are, inside the amniotic sac. There's an umbilical cord and a placenta. And right now they're still kind of writhing around in the amniotic sac. And pretty soon they're going to have to bust out of the amniotic sac. You can see a baby back here that already has. As we see another baby coming out, They're going to have to get out of the amniotic sac because once the umbilical cord ruptures, they won't be able to be getting oxygen from the mother anymore. They will have to start breathing. So I want you to focus in on behind that cave cricket. The cave crickets love to come and eat the amniotic sacs and the placentas. Focus in on this baby right here. There's its face, about to poke through the amniotic sac. Now watch. And there's the baby's first breath. And we got to watch this live on YouTube with people from around the world. It's a really special thing, and it really does change people's minds about rattlesnakes, which is part of the reason we do it. Then the mom was like, oh, I don't think I was giving you a good enough angle. So she moved and just literally showed us head on the birthing process. And these are prairie rattlesnakes in Colorado, and they give birth to an average of 8 babies. And then they hang out with them afterwards and take care of them. So they are good mothers, and that can really change people's minds. All right, so I'm just going to move on from that to show you. This is a mother rattlesnake hanging out with a bunch of baby rattlesnakes. It's a montage of the baby rattlesnakes yawning. There's our brand new babies. These are the first babies at the Colorado site, and you can see actually little placentas still laying around on that mother. And I invite everyone here to go to rattlecam.org. The cameras are both in hibernation mode right now because all the snakes are, but in May we will have the Colorado cam back up, and that will be up all summer, and then the California cam will come a little bit later in the summer. Very exciting, as we are now preparing a fundraiser to start another camera in 2026 on timber rattlesnakes in Pennsylvania. And so, of course, it's my dream to have these cameras basically everywhere. So I have a few more slides of thank yous and to tell you about some of the ways you can help. So first of all, just to thank everyone who was involved in helping me with the book, including the amazing photographers and my publisher, all the people who've helped with the design of the live streaming camera. This is not something you can just put in. This is all built from scratch because it's off the grid and it's really, really, really hard to do. One of the amazing things about the Project RattleCam and those cameras is that it's donor funded. So we've kind of have over 350 individual donors, many people donating a couple dollars to buy a sticker, and all that money comes into our research account. I want to especially thank and call out some of the major donors who've given large gifts that have been able to support large pieces of equipment or our expensive Verizon streaming fees or other things like that. And that includes Chris and Sarah Carmichael, Rattlesnake Ranch in Arizona, and Tanya Luthen. One more thing is that we are not content to just leave it at a YouTube channel that, by the way, it had 2.5 million views last year, so it's going great. But we've been working with teachers in training at Cal Poly to develop a 3rd to 5th grade curriculum. It's an 8-day curriculum called Rattle Ed. And all of our materials are available for free download on rattlecam.org. Essentially what happens is that the students in class are introduced to the biology of rattlesnakes by watching the live stream and collecting data on the snakes using their own lab notebook. It's a really cool project that we're just getting started, and we hope to see it be instituted in schools all over the place. So a couple of quick announcements that are really fun. California snakes and how to find them. You can get that at the link that was presented at the beginning, and that will come up again at the end. You can also get it if you want to. You can always get that elsewhere, of course. But I wanted to let you know that book 2 on lizards is coming out on April 22nd. This QR code is to my own online store where you can get like a signed book, or you can get swag. So I do special, like the shirt that Darius was wearing was a limited edition shirt that went with the California Snakes book. I have a limited edition California Lizards shirt and flag that are available for pre-order right now on my website. All of this money goes towards either the RattleCam or it goes to Central Coast Snake Services and my efforts here locally to rescue and rehabilitate snakes. So this is a really good way to get something for your donation. And I think we can all say that more than ever before, as many of our federal grants are being halted, that donor-funded work is really, really important for what we do. One of my grants on lizards was identified on the Ted Cruz's kind of hit list last week. It hasn't been halted as of yet, but this is happening to people all over the country, and it's really tragic, and it's going to set back science in a major way. And so this donor, the fact that we are donor funded for what we do, which makes sense because we are doing this community science project for the people. So it's funded by the people, which I think is amazing, is really important. And so I invite you, if you want to make a tax deductible donation to our research, you can do that there. And anyone who's interested in becoming a major donor can contact Morgan Marshall below for info on high impact donations. Second to last thing is to let you know ways that you can keep in touch and that you can follow us some more. I told you before about our kind of three-pronged approach. We have outreach via Project RattleCam and of course events like this. Research via my lab at Cal Poly, the Physiological Ecology of Reptiles lab, and then management via Central Coast Snake Services. If you go to emilytaylorscience.com, you can find links to all of those websites there. In addition, we are on Instagram and Facebook and X at RattleCams, at Snakey Mama, and at Coast Snake. And everyone here, if you don't know about it yet, you should know about our snake hotline, where we can identify any snake for you by texting the photo and location to that number that you see there at the bottom. We also can help you if there's any sort of snake conflict question that you have. We'll talk you through it. Everything we do there is all for free. And that's why those donations are so helpful and important. Before I show my last slide, I did want to tell everyone that we're going to start questions and answers in just a minute. I am going to be staying after 1 to continue questions for those of you who can stay behind, but anyone else who has to leave, that's obviously fine. This morning, I spent some time just scrolling through my own Facebook feed, and this is just a collage that I made of federal workers who have been fired, potentially illegally fired just in the past week from their jobs because they were probationary. This is a huge, huge problem, and this is something that I think many of us are aware of, and I want to try to support people. And so because this talk is, for the Los Padres Forest Watch, which is very intimately tied, of course, to our national forests and to the people that work there, I wanted to call everyone's attention to this and to urge you and ask you to write to your congresspeople and to tell them that this is not okay and that we need to be doing a better job about in our efforts to evaluate the federal workforce. Just this morning, I saw that Ben here who works in the Los Padres National Forest posted that they had been fired. So this is a tragedy and a travesty, and I do encourage everyone here to do everything that you can to support not just your local national forest, but all of your government organizations and the people that work there now and the people that formerly worked there. Call your congresspeople. It does help. So with that, I'm going to stop, and thank you all for watching my presentation on snakes, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for all your research. So we have a bunch of questions in the chat here. So we'll start with kind of the first one that came in. Why are the rattlers on the beaches in slow area? What are they doing there, and what are they eating?
Well, why not, right? No, I'm joking. I know what you mean. When I moved to San Luis Obispo from Arizona, which is a desert, I thought, why are all these rattlesnakes all over the beach? Because they are. The sand spit in Morro Bay is full of rattlesnakes. There's rodents there, and where there's rodents and places to hide, there's snakes. There's actually a lot of ground squirrels too in those areas. And I tell people kind of, if you want to know where to find rattlesnakes in California, go where the ground squirrels are, and you'll find them. So they're not going to be on like those big sandy beaches like Huntington Beach that are full of, people, but they are going to be on our natural beaches that have some vegetation and places they can hide. And they can be very common in those areas. It's a really great weather for them, and it's full of rodents. So they're happy snakes there.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, this kind of links into, there was another question about what kinds of owls have this mutualism with snakes. Just thinking through, you would think they would be competitors for those rodents. Yeah.
You mean the mutualism with the little blind snakes that were the little thread snakes that were in there?
Yeah, I think it came up during that part.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm not off the top of my head. I'm forgetting what it was. I think it may have been great horned owls, but I'm not sure. I would have to fact check myself on that. I have on my website, emilytaylorscience.com, if you go to the book section, I have a bibliography of every source that I used in the snake book. And so that paper will be listed on there. And so I will go check. I could check right now, but you probably want to get to more questions. I will say that, yeah, the relationship between owls and snakes is complicated. They're going to be competing in terms of rodents, but then owls are major predators of snakes. And then we now have uncovered a way that they benefit each other with a mutualism. But of course, the thread snakes are not going to be competing with rattlesnakes for food because the thread snakes just eat little insects. It'd be more like a rattlesnake or a gopher snake competing with the owls for food. So it's just a really interesting ecological web.
Oh, that's fascinating. So someone had a question that kind of goes together with another question, and it's, is it true that rattlesnakes don't travel further than 4 miles from their nest? And then if they have repeat rattlesnakes on their property, can the whole nest be relocated?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first things first, a rattlesnake nest is a very specific thing that is different from what a lot of people think it is. So a rattlesnake nest is when a female rattlesnake gives birth and she stays with her babies. In California, that's usually going to be for about a week or two before they all go their separate ways. And that nest can be like, most often it's inside a ground squirrel burrow, or it could be in a rocky area. And so a rattlesnake female might use a much larger area, but then she kind of sits in one spot to nest, but then she'll leave and go off to other areas after that. So a couple things. I think that the spirit of the person's question is about moving snakes and how to do it in a way that's okay for the snakes, but is effective. And it's an art, all right? It really is, which is why my students and I have actually done research where we move telemitered snakes just to make sure that and to see that they do well. On my website, centralcoastsnakeservices.com, at the link section, I have a summary of every single study that's been done on relocation of California rattlesnakes to show how to do it right. The long story short is that 4 miles is tricky. Most snakes in California are going to have much smaller home ranges than that. As a rule of thumb, rattlesnakes should be relocated about a 1/4 mile, maybe a 1/2 mile away. Research has shown that snakes that are moved that far away aren't very likely to move back, but they still tend to do pretty well. If you move them many miles away, they're very disoriented sometimes and they can't find their way back, and or they can't find their way around at all. But when it's a nest, it's just really sensitive. Like, you don't want to try to move a mother and babies if you don't have to. Those are the kind of things that are a great thing to call my hotline, 805-401-0811, about, because I love to help people with challenging situations with like a rattlesnake nest. I can kind of talk people through it.
That's great. There was a question about if they call you, like how long does it take for you to come out or something? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we do San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, and I have a team of people who do the work. And everyone, they have jobs and stuff. So sometimes people can be busy and it might take a few minutes, but sometimes people are available right away. So we try to get people out there very, very quickly. Usually we can get people out there within like half an hour or an hour. And if it's going to be longer, then we, have strategies for people to keep an eye on the snake from far away. So honestly, it depends. Sometimes we can get there within 5 minutes. If for snakes that are not in San Luis Obispo or Santa Barbara counties, there is a website called freesnakerelocation.org where you can look and see if there's someone who does free snake relocation in your area. Also, you can always text the hotline and I can try to find someone to connect you with too.
Amazing. There is someone that's asking about a California king snake that's been a family pet. Okay to release in the wild?
No. Unfortunately, once a snake has been in captivity for any given amount of time, more than just like a day or two, you should not release it. And there's a few reasons why. The most important reason is that no matter how well kept the snake is, it could have contracted some sort of disease that then by taking it out into the wild, it could spread that disease to native wildlife. The other thing is you may not know where the snake came from. Like, you might have caught it around your house, but it may have come from somewhere else. And you never want to let snakes go where even if California king snakes occur there, you don't want to let them go if that California king snake didn't. And the third reason is that snake has probably gotten really used to having its food brought to it, and it may not thrive when it gets put back out in the wild. It'd be like if someone basically gets used to having someone cook for them all the time, and then they're dumped out and they don't know how to hunt. It'd be really hard for them. So snakes that have been in captivity need to either be kept until they die, which can be 30, 40, 50 years, or rehomed to a responsible snake owner.
Makes sense. We have a bunch of questions about joining your lab. So that's really good. So the first one is just about actually if you're accepting PhD students at this time.
We don't have a PhD program at Cal Poly. So my graduate students are all doing their master's degrees. Absolutely encourage people who have their undergraduate degrees in, biology or wildlife biology or even another field. I mean, my degree was in English and I went on to grad school, to contact me about grad school. The deadlines have passed already now for fall 2025, but I'm starting to look for people for fall 2026. And then for people who are interested in their PhD, I'm on the committees of many grad students who are getting their PhDs at other universities. So I'm glad to always help and collaborate there.
Great. And as you've been working with snakes, there's a question about what's the largest one you've ever seen?
The largest snake? Oh,
Yeah.
boy. Shoot. I'm not even really sure. Let's see. Probably a big boa constrictor down in Panama. It was pretty big.
Mhm.
I don't know, I'm not really sure. The biggest rattlesnake I've ever seen was about 4 feet long and was really fat. That thing weighed it's probably like 5 pounds, which honestly, there's rattlesnakes that weigh more than that. People who are in Florida right now are like, whatever. But out here, I mean, it wasn't even out here. This was in a timber rattlesnake over in the Midwest. So rattlesnakes can get pretty big, but they don't get very big in California. Yeah.
Yeah. And another question about your lab was, how does the radio tracking on snakes work?
Yeah, so there's lots of ways to radio track rattlesnakes. Brief answer to that is that you can surgically implant radio transmitters that just sit in their body cavity alongside their stomach. And then they heal up really well. Rattlesnakes do really well with that. And then you can follow them around. Those radio transmitters last for like 2, even 3 years before you have to surgically remove them. And then in big rattlesnakes, you can attach an external transmitter to their rattle, to the base of their tail and their rattle. And then you kind of wire wrap it and then epoxy it so it stays. And then rattlesnakes aren't big enough to do GPS tracking, but someday GPS transmitters might be small enough to put on a rattlesnake, but they're not right now. The only snakes that I know of, I'm sure there's probably more, but they're doing radio telemetry with satellite trackers on big invasive pythons in Florida right now. And so eventually that technology will catch up and we can do that with rattlesnakes.
Very cool. Very cool. And Judy asks, Emily, do you still have buzz? I'm guessing it's a snake.
Yes. Hi, Judy. Okay. So unfortunately, Buzz passed away last July at the age of 27.
Wow.
Probably from old age, he was really obese when I adopted him when he was about 22. And I had him on a diet for 5 years, but he just didn't lose much weight. They're very efficient. So he probably had a shortened life because of being overfed. But I'm happy to announce that I have 3 rattlesnakes right now. One is named Buzz Jr.
Very cool. Well, that leads us into a couple questions about pregnancy in snakes. So how do we ID a rattlesnake is pregnant?
So it can be easy and sometimes it's not as easy. So the technical pregnancy is usually going to begin around May when the snakes ovulate. And so the eggs are fertilized by sperm that was either deposited there recently by a male or stored. They can actually store sperm for years, which is really cool. And then it might not be super easy. The snake will just look fat because only fat female rattlesnakes are going to have babies that year. But then as pregnancy progresses, she tends to swell up a little more, especially like in June and then July, August, which is the prime months of pregnancy. It's going to be the lower third of her body that is going to be just distended. As opposed to if you see a rattlesnake that has recently eaten a meal, it's going to be real skinny in the neck and then distended in its mid body and then skinny in the tail. With a pregnant female, it's pushed downward a little bit. It looks like she has a big booty, we say. And so that's usually the way you can tell. You can't always tell. Like some thick-bodied rattlesnake species, like out east, it's harder for me to tell. But the ones out west, I can tell because I've seen so many of them. But if you see a really fat female rattlesnake in the summer, she's usually like a Western rattlesnake. This is not true of things like Eastern diamondbacks and stuff because they can take several years to reproduce. But a Western rattlesnake out here, they usually reproduce every 2 years. And so if they're fat enough to reproduce, they're going to be pregnant that summer. And you can always send me a photo and I'll tell you what I think. I love it when people text me photos.
That's so great. And then that leads us into, do snakes ever crossbreed? Like someone also asked about the garter snake, I believe, if it was trying to mate with the rattler. Is that
Yeah.
something that kind of
Well,
happens?
the garter snake was the garter snakes just they do this thing called scramble competition where they get in big balls. And a lot of times there'll be like a bunch of males with like a poor female in the middle, and they're just all trying to mate with her at the same time. So they're just kind of indiscriminately putting their tail around trying to mate. If a garter snake did successfully mate with a rattlesnake, which would be unlikely, they wouldn't be able to make a baby together. They're too genetically distant. However, certain snakes do hybridize, so it's common for rattlesnake species at the edges of their range to interbreed to a certain extent with the other rattlesnake species at the edge of their range. Hybridization is something that is, you know, seems decently common in rattlesnakes. And then very, very, very occasionally you'll get a more shocking hybrid, like a hybrid between something that is a little more distantly related. Examples are like a cottonmouth copperhead hybrid, very, very, very uncommon. And so for the most part, the rattlesnakes are if they do hybridize, it's really just going to be with other rattlesnakes.
Interesting. And what months do they give birth? The
Yeah,
rats.
good question. Birthing in rattlesnakes happens in the late summer. So it can be anytime from July through October. But in California, that's typically going to peak in late August or early September.
Very interesting. And have we seen with like all the weather changes we've been going through, any changes in their behavior, hibernation lengths, or just some of the behaviors they're doing?
Yeah, it's hard to know because there's no one who's really done long enough studies. That requires people doing studies on the same populations for many, many, many decades to be able
Mhm.
to see if that's true. And off the top of my head, I don't know of any studies like that. I can tell you though that rattlesnake behavior is very much dependent on the weather. We have some studies we've done and published. People can see them on my website if they want to, where we compare some of the coastal populations of Western rattlesnakes here to the inland populations. And the coastal populations, it doesn't get as cold in the winter and it doesn't get as hot in the summer. So it's less seasonal than the ones inland. And we see big differences in their activity patterns. On the coast here in California, you can have rattlesnakes active year round. They're not super active right now, but they could be above ground, whereas they're hibernating in the inland. So it's mainly that. I mean, so for that reason, I would suggest that, yeah, I'm betting that as climate change occurs, we're going to see rattlesnakes coming out of hibernation a little earlier in certain places. It's just a matter of having long-term data. We don't really have that.
Yeah. We have a couple questions about fear. And I guess the very first one was, were you ever afraid of snakes? You seem so comfortable around them.
Yeah, it's so hard. I don't know if everyone can think back to like thinking back to before like I just don't really remember. Although I do have an anecdote. I would say that I didn't really think one thing or another about snakes growing up. A lot of herpetologists like me were super into snakes growing up, and that wasn't me. I didn't get interested in them until college. Um, I don't remember thinking one thing or the other, but I do remember when I was running cross country in high school in Marin County that I was running. I don't know if it was a race or if it was training. It was by myself, and there was a California king snake in the path. I didn't see it till I was upon it, and I was able to jump over it. And I remember like running away and my heart rate going up, and I think it kind of helped my time. But I just didn't know anything about snakes back then, so I wasn't like focused like, oh my God, I'm scared of snakes. And I think my personality was very much the type to like embrace things that are, unpopular, things that are that are popular among what boys do. I was very much like a tomboy, that type of thing. So I pretty much got into them pretty quickly once I learned about the truth about them.
Yeah, they seem pretty awesome after watching those videos, honestly. And from the video, there was someone that wondered why like ants and crickets weren't necessarily afraid of snakes. It seemed like they didn't mind being around the birth.
Yeah, the ants and the crickets, and there were so many other insects and arachnids there. It's crazy how much stuff we saw. They're not scared of the snakes because the snakes don't eat them, period. And so they're probably attracted to some of the snakes because there's very little water in that environment, and we saw the cave crickets just eating and probably getting the water from the afterbirth. But we saw so much neat stuff. Go to our YouTube channel, you'll see. Like we saw wasps coming and paralyzing crickets and dragging them away to parasitoid, wasps. We saw at night when we could zoom in to the little crevice where the snakes were, there were all of these little cycodid flies that would have these like dance parties on the snake at night. And I didn't know anything about them. And eventually, because it was public, was connected with a cycodid fly biologist who informed me that those were male flies who were all partying there and waiting for the females to arrive. And eventually we saw a couple females come. The females were the ones that feed on a snake's blood, and the males would all come and mate on them. We have this
Wow.
really cool clip of a black widow that was sitting next to a female rattlesnake, and she feels it kind of on her skin, and she looks over and she sees it, and she acts all scared. She's like, oh my God. So I was like, look, even rattlesnakes are scared of black widows. Like, it's pretty cool. So we just saw all kinds of crazy insect stuff. Everyone should just go through the clips, the videos, and find they're titled what they are, so you can find all kinds of stuff to watch.
Amazing. Well, this was fascinating. We have one last question about why the gopher snake's eye is so different than the rattlesnake's eye.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know very much about snake eyes. I will say that um they're not, I mean, they are certainly they're different. I'll give you a hypothesis. Probably a better answer out there. Gopher snakes and rattlesnakes, they're distantly related, first of all. Both of them tend to typically be diurnal snakes, but it depends on where you are. So like in the deserts, they both might be out at night instead. They're out during the day, gopher snakes. And so the size of shape of the pupil can oftentimes be affected by how much light that the animal wants in. So a big round pupil is because they're letting a lot of light in. So that happens during the day. That's why a lot of nocturnal snakes have vertical pupils. It's because they basically, are not really relying on that sense as much. That said, rattlesnakes' pupils can change shape. So you can have rattlesnake pupils can go from round and also can go to be vertical. So I don't really know. I certainly don't know, and I don't know how well it's been studied on a deep level. I'm sure that there's probably a specialist out there who's like, here's why they're different. But I would say that it has to do with the difference in their evolutionary history, right? And then also potential differences in their ecology. Like maybe it could also have to do with the fact that rattlesnakes can supplement their vision with infrared radiation sensing in their pits so that their visual systems are fundamentally different than a gopher snake. I'm just hand waving right here. I'm not sure. So
Yeah, I mean, it was fascinating to see all the different types and to know
yeah.
that 50 different types in California. It was amazing. So we want to thank everyone for coming and thank Dr. Taylor for being here and all your amazing work with your lab. Thank you as well for helping out with human wildlife conflicts. And as I mentioned, that's a huge part of my new job here at Los Padres Forest Watch. So please do reach out to Dr. Taylor's services if you need it. And you can always take action with us here in our local forest. We have lots of ways that you can volunteer and get involved. You can also give to our organization as we're doing this work, trying to keep our forest wild. And you can, of course, follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So keep watch on your emails. We'll have this recorded if you want to send it on to anyone else. And we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.